I'm so honored to be here, and I'm really grateful to Lion for asking me to moderate this. Usually I beg off on moderating. I'm not that great at it, and I am going to be selfish today, though. I jumped at the chance to do this because I recently announced that I'm leaving CNN, and I'll be launching my own community news ventures. And so I couldn't think of two better people for me to begin my journey with. And I'll be asking them selfishly a series of questions over the next few minutes. And I'm really grateful for them and their time. Let me introduce them. So Kate Maxwell is the publisher and co-founder of the Mendocino Voice, a local online news outlet founded in 2016, what a year that was, in Northern California. And it's currently transitioning to a cooperative news model. She is also a JSK Community Impact Fellow for 2020 to 2021. Mazen Sid Ahmed is a co-founding editor and senior reporter at Documented, a nonprofit news site that covers immigration in the New York area. Before founding Documented, he was a reporter at The Guardian US in New York on the national desk, as well as with the award-winning Guardian Mobile Innovation Lab. He started his career covering the Syrian refugee crisis in Beirut, Lebanon, for the local English language newspaper, The Daily Star. So I just wondered if I could begin with each of you giving me a state of your world, not a state of the world. That would be quite impossible right now, but it has been quite a year. 2020 has been a challenging year. We've also, while seeing unprecedented global events, seen such interest in local news. And I was just wondering if you could situate each of your organizations in this historic year that we've had. Kate, I'm going to begin with you.
Sure. So 2020 has been quite a year for all of us. And I think here in Mendocino County, we, like many other parts of the country, have seen a lot of cutbacks in our legacy news outlets. So Mendocino County has always been somewhat of a news desert, but unfortunately that has increased even further this year with staff cuts at the local Alden Global Media papers and the local weeklies and other more traditional local news outlets. For us at the Mendocino Voice, it has actually been a year of amazing growth, in part because our model was one that was already trying to reach people in many different parts of our community and was really focused on being as accessible as possible, using the tools we have with our online news distribution. And so when the pandemic hit, we were actually very prepared to be working remotely, to be looking at innovative ways to reach our readers. And we've also been able to expand a lot of our collaborations locally with the more hyperlocal or independent, smaller local outlets. And so for us, I think the real challenge has been how can we grow quickly enough to fill the growing gaps in news coverage in our community, but we've really seen overwhelming support from our readers. We've had an amazing growth in our membership program. We've had actually an increase in ad sales. And so for us, it's really shown the potential of what a resilient, flexible local news model can provide, especially in a combination of ongoing emergencies like we're all seeing right now.
Thanks, Kate. Mazen, what has 2020 been like for Documented?
Yeah, just everything. First of all, really happy to be here and really thankful for Lion, but everything that Kate said just resonated so deeply with our experience this year. It's been a tough year for New York City, as the world knows, and everywhere in the world has struggled. New York City bore the brunt of the crisis very early on. And in March, when the pandemic hit, it was a really dark time in New York, and we felt like, you know, we had to respond. And much similar to Kate, we realized that a lot of the work that we've been doing and a lot of the things that we've been putting in place for the past few years all kind of came together at the same time and were actually exactly what people needed in this moment. So we are a really small team. We were able to go remote really easily. A lot of our work is done via WhatsApp. We received some support this year to ramp up that work, even prior to the pandemic, even prior to the pandemic beginning. But as the pandemic began, we were able to be responsive to the needs of people that really needed information at this time. So all of our work in WhatsApp is in Spanish and is targeting Spanish-speaking undocumented immigrants in the city. And they were hit the hardest in New York City by the crisis on every front, from an employment perspective and from a health perspective. You know, we did one of the first stories about how neighborhoods and zip codes that had the highest percentages of foreign-born New Yorkers were also the hardest hit by the crisis and by the pandemic. So we were responding to people's needs on health, on labor issues, on immigration issues, trying to organize Facebook Lives, connecting with experts, and the work really resonated. We saw massive growth across everything, you know, readership on our website, subscribers to our WhatsApp newsletter, subscribers to our email newsletter. The city government was even like referencing our resources to get people to sign up for them. So it was kind of jarring in this way to feel like, you know, all of these horrible things were happening, but at the same time, our work became so necessary that we actually started to see a lot of success and growth, you know, while all these terrible things were happening in New York City. So it was confusing in that sense, but we managed to, I think, provide a really vital resource for people in a time when they really needed it. And this kind of focused us as an organization. I feel like now, we really have a very clear purpose. You know, we've always known what we wanted to do, but being able to see our work resonate in that way has really focused us, and has been able to allow us to kind of stop doing certain things that maybe we felt like we didn't need to be doing anymore, and focused on mission, which has been good, I think.
That's tremendous. And I'm talking to you from Jackson Heights, Queens, which is the epicenter of the epicenter, as they say. So I know our community relied on the services you're talking about immensely. I think there's a tendency in 2020 for us to focus on three storylines, which have a lot to do with each other. They're the three Ps, if you will: the pandemic, the protests, and the presidencies. Kate, in your case, you had another story that has consumed much of the year in the wildfires. And I just wondered, as we're talking about service to users, if you could take us through this fourth storyline that you all out west had to contend with, and what your approach there was.
Yeah, you know, I think this year we had the largest recorded wildfire in California history that includes part of our county. And unfortunately, this is a 1 million acre fire. We had the same dubious distinction in 2018 with the state's previous largest fire at that time. And so how we can serve our community during these, you know, what first starts as breaking news, kind of an immediate emergency, but often becomes a long-term story as the fires continue and communities look to rebuild and become more resilient, has really shaped our approach to coverage, you know, from very early on after we started. And so how people actually access that information, for our readers, seeing smoke in the air at this point is a newsworthy event to them, and understanding how far away is that smoke, where is the fire, do I need to evacuate now, do I need to contact people that might be close to it, how do I understand what's going on, and how do I navigate what this means for my life in a clear, accessible way, has been something that we started focusing on very early on, and has really informed how we engage with just providing information in the clearest, most accurate, accessible way, for our community. And I think that has proved true again, unfortunately, summer after summer as these fires continue. But the insights that we've learned from how do we really engage with readers, both in the midst of the wildfire, and how do we serve as an ongoing source of reliable, accurate, timely, and really useful information to help people just navigate their everyday lives in a place that they can find it easily, and from a source they can rely on. We're often the only source of Spanish language coverage about wildfires, and through that, we've increased the amount of translation happening from county agencies. We do a lot of live stream coverage. We work with local community organizations to help connect people with rebuilding resources that they might have. And so, I think these experiences with what might typically just be seen as kind of a story that is talked about from a distance, by shaping our coverage to really how our readers need that information and what's useful to them, has helped us build this really important relationship of trust. And we're a source that provides information people can't find anywhere else, and they can really rely on us in times of needs. And I think that has really just shaped how we see our mission and our role here in the community for all other kinds of situations, whether or not it's elections, whether or not it's the pandemic. I think all of these lessons about just being responsive and engaged and building your delivery systems to be accessible and clear have been a huge part of our success in the last couple of years, and sort of how we see our role as beyond just a newspaper, sort of a community organization working with other people.
I think that is remarkable in 2020. If there's a silver lining, it's that what we once called service journalism, utility journalism, public journalism, solutions journalism is now just good journalism. And I think even the biggest of the big organizations are understanding their role in literally life and death, as you're outlining. The other area, Kate, that I just want you to go a little deeper on, and you're alluding to this with collaborating across government agencies, community groups, readers themselves who might know more than us. How does that work? Do you have an apparatus? Do you have a system, a process by which you're collaborating? I just wondered if you could give us some of your tips around that.
I think we've tried really hard to sort of build in these engagement mechanisms or these feedback loops throughout the different levels of our organization. So we do talk a lot with community organizations, and we are regularly engaging with our readers, whether it's social media, whether it's by email, whether it's comments on our website or tables at the farmers market, which we've scaled back a little bit recently. But I think as opposed to the existing legacy papers, or even the radio stations that we have here, from the beginning, we have really treated our readers as if, they are not just sources, but they're experts in their own lives. And so our county is huge. It's really rural. If there's a wildfire that's closing a road, it may take me personally an hour to get there, and there may not be great cell service. And so it is really our readers that will contact us and say, hey, I see this road's closed. It looks like the fire might be approaching this direction. Do you have any more information? And so I think just in terms of our reporting practices, we've really tried to focus on a mutual relationship as opposed to just a one-way, we tell you the news and we decide how you get it and when. But part of what we're also planning to do with our transition to a cooperative is really make this a community-owned organization. And so our both the workers at the organization, but also our readers will have a real ownership stake. They will be able to trust and also find us accountable when we're not serving them. And we can really look at our role as how are we working to build this community alongside our readers, alongside community organizations, even in collaboration with government agencies to push them to do more translation or to look at how their delivery systems are working. I think as opposed to thinking of ourselves as experts, sort of saying, how can we support the information needs of this community in a way that works for people where they're at, has really been a big part of our mission.
Mazen, what's the documented version of collaboration? Does it come up on a regular basis? Do you save it for bigger projects? How does that work?
Yeah, it was just great listening to Kate there, because I think that there is a lot of similarity in the ways that we look at how we talk about and think about the people who are consuming our work. We always wanted to have this mission of people most affected by our stories are also the people reading our stories, but it's kind of grown now into, because we have this vibrant community who's following our work on WhatsApp that we're in constant dialogue with, that people are really almost acting as editors in our newsroom, like the people who subscribe to our WhatsApp news service. So pretty much everything that we publish in Spanish is in direct response to questions that we get via our WhatsApp news service. The questions are often the source of investigative stories or accountability journalism. Sometimes people will ask a question and there's a straightforward answer. You call a city agency, you contact a lawyer, but sometimes you're like, well, wait a minute, why isn't there an answer to this question? Is there something going on here? Is the city not telling us something? Do we need to put a reporter on this to actually figure this out? And that's led to some really great work. This year especially, we've been able to find out that some city response services weren't actually doing what they said they were doing. And as far as like when we're doing a feature or we have an idea for a story, we often turn to the community and say, hey, is anybody experiencing this issue? How's anybody going through this? We'd love to talk to anybody. I've also enjoyed call-outs that we've done recently, trying to hear positive experiences that people have had, trying to hear people who have made maybe the pandemic easier or have helped them through challenging times, and trying to create a feedback loop on our WhatsApp news service where we're sharing challenges that people are having, uncovering things, sharing information, but also kind of uplifting people who are doing good and helping other people out. We're trying to do more of that on our WhatsApp news service. Like we've started using the voice note function. Anyone who uses WhatsApp knows it's pretty common. That's some people will just communicate via voice notes. So now we're starting to do like audio bulletins, like news bulletins, and weaving in voices of people who are sharing positive stories, their neighbor, their granddaughter, things like that. So that collaborative approach, we call it community-based journalism or community-based investigative journalism if it results in an investigative story, is really more and more becoming just the kind of epicenter of what we're doing, or the engine of everything that we're doing. The majority of our stories are coming from our WhatsApp community. We want to get to a place where it's just like a constant feedback loop, where pretty much everything that we're doing is a part of that. And so collaboration is a big part of what we do.
So I think in the framing of local news, there's sometimes a tendency to somewhat dismiss it as parochial, right? And I wonder, Mazen, if your background is phenomenal as you're reporting overseas, and I just wonder how you anchor community stories in the world, and how that kind of has played out over, especially the pandemic.
Well, obviously living in New York City, a lot of the people here have global ties, and a lot of their experiences are tied to international issues. You can say that about pretty much anywhere in the world, but it's something that we've been acutely aware of since we started Documented. We've always wanted to do stories connecting to why people are coming to the US. There's a lot of talk about the border and how people are ending up in the US, but there isn't any conversations really about the refugee crisis that's happening in Central America and why people are fleeing right now. So trying to connect day-to-day stories that are happening in New York City with migration patterns and trends that are happening globally and how they're shaping New York City, how they're shaping the culture and the life in New York City is something that we set out to do from the beginning. And we've been able to do that actually through some really great partnerships with some Central American news outlets. You know, we did a series of stories last year in partnership with Central American news outlets about how, why certain people were leaving different parts of El Salvador and Guatemala, and connecting them to stories of people living here in the New York area. Intercambio is one of the publications that we work with that were just really, really incredible reporters. And a lot of the reporters that are pitching us who are coming from, you know, reporting for Chinese newspapers in New York City are often doing stories about how international politics is affecting the community, and how, you know, how the relationship between the US and China is affecting the Chinese community in New York City. So there are a lot of different ways you can tie international issues, especially on a topic like ours. But yeah, I think it's funny that a lot of people kind of dismiss local news as this bureaucratic issue, when it's probably most people's, it affects most people more so than a lot of other national stories.
Yeah, I just want to stay with also your distribution model. Your over the last year, you know, as I launched a newsletter, a lot of people mentioned you guys, and you're just intentionally distributed, right? You're on WhatsApp, you're on newsletters. Who manages that? How does it work? And are there any shortcuts or lessons for those of us who might not have a distribution arm?
Yeah. So we're a tiny team. So yeah, shortcuts. So basically, I'll just tell you how it works. Basically, we have an incredible audience editor. His name is Nicholas Rios. He joined us full time this year. He's been working with us in different capacities for a while now, but he became a full-time staff for this year. And he does it all. So he manages our WhatsApp news service. You know, there's about 1,700 people on there. And he'll send private messages to individuals, you know, responding to their questions. He will send out a bulletin every Saturday with a roundup of immigration news. He works with an intern on creating the audio version of the bulletin. But he really creates this amazing personal experience. You know, people will sign up. He introduces himself as Nicholas, but within 2 or 3 messages, people are like, "Hey, Nico, I need some help with this thing. Like, can you help me out?" So he's really good at just making it feel, the reason we found WhatsApp so appealing is we wanted it to feel as though we were in conversation with people, that they had this personal relationship with us. And you know, his tone and how responsive he is has allowed us to grow in that way. But yeah, there's no real magic bullet other than that. Just like constantly putting it out. I think making stories that people who you think would want to subscribe for it. A lot of times people will find those stories via search and then sign up for our newsletter. That has been something that we realized this year. So kind of being intentional in that way can create feedback loop source.
So I feel like we could talk for hours. I'm going to wrap it up here and ask Kate, what does coverage look like in 2021? If you could look into your crystal ball, what are some areas of coverage, strategic initiatives? Tell us what you're thinking.
So, you know, I think for us, a lot of the things we've talked about in this conversation are really what is guiding how we're doing our 2020 and beyond planning. I think we are looking to expand our collaborations with sort of local regional media more to the extent that we can, just to support broader coverage locally and then regionally, and to try and address these gaps and moving forward and support new initiatives or new kinds of news that people might want to have access to. We're in the midst of our cooperative transition, and that's something that we think will work really well here, in part because we are a rural community without a lot of resources and without a lot of foundation or philanthropic funding. And so that's a model that we think could potentially be adapted to a variety of other communities. And part of that is also sort of working even more deeply with the readers here in Mendocino that we don't feel like we're reaching, whether or not it's expanding our Spanish language coverage. Through my JSK fellowship, we're going to be working with training local residents to help do some of the news production and sort of serve as community reporters as sort of the next way that we are looking to expand. And we're also trying to look really hard at our distribution systems also. You know, I don't think there's a magic bullet, but for many people, it's not necessarily about, some of it is there needs to be more coverage, but some of it is just, are they actually able to access the information that's out there? Do they know where to look? Do they have a digital connection to get internet quickly? Do they have radio signals where they live to actually hear the local radio station? And so for us, we try and be on as many different kinds of distribution systems as possible, but really being in greater dialogue with our readers and saying, how can we focus these news products so that we can reach people who are in a broad range of different circumstances, but are all together as a community engaged in these local decisions about how we're going to move forward all together in 2021 and beyond. So,
Mazen, 2021, what does that look like for Documented?
Wow, yeah, it's hard to picture what's going to happen. I think we'll definitely be trying to refine this model that we were talking about, a community-based investigative journalism model. We've done a lot of great work on it this year, but we're hoping to, build out more of a reporting team that can really kind of double down and follow the leads and do accountability journalism based on what we're hearing from our WhatsApp community, and hopefully trying to make similar projects in other languages for different communities in New York City. That's the hope, that we can do information needs assessments and build platforms and similar digital communities in other languages based on the needs of other communities in New York. But it took us 2 years really to get to this place with WhatsApp, so that might be a longer term project, but we're trying to be ambitious and hopefully we can do something next year.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you. This has been really illuminating. I'm grateful for your time, and I'm sure everyone else who's watching is too.
Thank you.
yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that, my friends. What a wonderful conversation. And obviously, thank you for the amazing work that you're doing.